chapters 1 and 2 lab for Group B. I'm Lainey Cantrell.
I'm Natalie Stevens.
And I'm Uchechi Onugwe.
Okay, so for the first question, part A, I said all the people who used to work on farms now have other jobs based on innovation. Most adult males in the US are not unemployed. People who would have been farmers now work as engineers, customer service, retail, etc. For part B, I said most working Americans are not making a living from fixing farm equipment. Instead, they're creating that farm equipment and other machines to further advance technology and society. And then for number 2, I said the analogy fool in the shower applies to central banking because in central banking it takes time to see the adjustments made actually take place in the economy. If a central banker is making changes in banking, they can't expect to see the results immediately. It takes time for an economy to react. A central banker needs to be working one step ahead, not just based on the present economy. Just like in the shower, it takes a little while for the temperature to change, so you shouldn't constantly be changing the temperature based on how it feels in that moment. For number 3, I said I feel like the overall fraction of humans who are poor probably has stayed about the same over the last 1,000 years. Poverty has always and will always be an issue. In any economy, poverty will be a prominent part of society. The total number of people in deep poverty has definitely increased. Since the population has drastically increased over the last thousands of years, so has the amount of people in poverty.
For number 4, I said that in the same way that losing 100 pounds requires self-control, ending hyperinflation also requires self-control because it is up to the Federal Reserve to regulate the money supply. This means that they would have to decide to stop printing money until prices regulate. For number 5, we talked about opportunity cost, and for part A, I put 2 fuel injectors per hour because that is the cost of repairing one transmission. For part B, I responded with responding to 800 emails every 2 hours because it's double the rate of responding to 200 telephone calls per hour. For part C, I answered with 2.5 articles this year because it is half the rate of writing 5 articles this year.
Okay, for question 6, I could not find the table that I was referencing, but I did go online and find numbers there, so it could be a little off from what was expected. For part A, I said the North has a major absolute advantage when it comes to making high-quality cars. When you think of nice car brands such as Lexus, BMW, and Tesla, these are all being made in the US, Europe, or Japan, aka the North. These countries have become very good at creating these high-end cars. The South has the absolute advantage when it comes to lower quality cars. For part B, I said the North has a lower opportunity cost when it comes to producing high-quality cars since they excel at it. It only makes sense for them to be able to produce them with as little financial loss as possible. The South has the lower opportunity cost for the lower quality cars for the same reason. For part C, I said in a for part C, my answer was that there's always going to be a demand for both types of cars, so we will need to produce both types of cars. And then for part D, I said the global output of high quality cars would be in the north, low quality in the south. It would be higher for each type of car because the countries that produce them would be more efficient, respectively for each one. Okay, for part 7, part A, I said Kana has the comparative advantage in cleaning the kitchen, Mitchell has it in making the soup. For part B, Sienna has the comparative advantage for baking cookies, while Ethan has it for laying drywall. For part C, Kara has the comparative advantage for building glass sculptures, and Sarah has one for designing newspaper ads. And for part D, Data has a comparative advantage for both writing poems and solving problems. In this case, you'd have to choose which of these was more important to you to get it done. And then for part A, I said, when you look at this problem in terms of productivity, the US and its workers still beat out any overseas workers in terms of how much quality work can be done in a shorter amount of time. While overseas manufacturing has become more popular as it is cheaper, in the end, the US and these companies have realized that the productivity is much higher when we're where we are. Not to mention that it's way less expensive to transport the product when we produce it here in the US.
So Allison wasn't able to make our meeting today, but she did answer the questions, so I'm going to go ahead and read her responses. So for part A, she said if it took South Korea 1 hour to produce an automobile, they would be at a comparative advantage, while it took them 500 hours, so the US has the comparative advantage. For part B, she said United States has the absolute advantage in producing airplanes. It isn't possible to determine which country has the absolute advantage in autos right now. For part C, she said 12.5 hours. For number 10, part A, she said first you need to plot the endpoints of the PPF by figuring out the maximum numbers of computers and shirts. If both the United States and Mexico produced only computers, how many would they produce? What if they only produce shirts? Plot these 2 points. Okay, so she did the table down there, so we can scroll down. All right, and then for part B, she said if citizens want more shirts, they would be produced in Mexico because the opportunity cost of a shirt produced in Mexico is 1/6 of a computer. It's lower than the opportunity cost of a shirt produced in the US. Right, and then for part C, she said if citizens want more computers, they would be produced in the US because United States opportunity cost for one computer is much lower than Mexico's. Right, and then for part D, she said this is a combination of the two nations' separate PPFs because it accounts for the comparative advantage in each country and shows how, when each country specializes in a product, more of each product can be made. All right, and then in part F, she said as more countries join the trade alliance, the graph would get bigger and bigger, more farther out. If an infinite number of countries join, the graph would grow even more.
So for number 11, part A, I said that it's a good deal for the US because the opportunity cost of making one computer is one shirt. If they trade one computer for 3 shirts, the US benefits from that by gaining 2 more shirts for the cost of one computer. It is also a good deal for Mexico because Mexico can make shirts at a lower cost than the US and trade those shirts for more computers. For part B, I said that it would be very beneficial for the US because they get more shirts for the price of one computer. However, this would be a bad deal for Mexico because it would be more expensive to make 8 shirts for only one computer, rather than just making 6 computers. For part C, I said that if you make a table of the PPCs for both countries, the maximum is 6 shirts and the minimum is 1 shirt.
All right, and that concludes our chapter 1 and 2 lab. Thank you for your time.